Perfect. Thank you for joining this afternoon. We are live with the Body Temple Health Message. This is week 2. We will be sharing God's plan. And this message is available to anyone who so wish to know a little bit more about the health message. God's plan. And this message is available to anyone who so wish to know a little bit more about the health message. All right, thank you. So this week we are going to be looking at the body that has prepared for me. And last week we did talk about how the body is organized in special functions based on the body parts. And okay, so here we are. This message is just for educational purposes. It's not meant to diagnose anyone, treat or cure, or mitigate any diseases. And it's based on a book which was written by Dr. Dwayne and Nancy McHenry, who are from MEDUNA. Or mitigate any diseases. And it's based on a book which was written by Dr. Dwayne and Nancy McHenry, who are from MEDUNA. Perfect. So as you join in, this is the live session. I see some people are still joining us. Okay, thank you. So as you join in, you might have some questions. Please, I ask that you mute yourselves, and I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions, as well as you can type messages in the chat box. So far we've talked about how the body is created with intelligence. We've talked about how the body is created with intelligence and how this intelligence comes from God. And when God created the body, he made different body parts to function. To function a certain way, and that these body parts communicate with each other. And these body parts function in a special way, and they also communicate with each other. join again with sound. Can you hear me now? Okay, I hope you can hear me. So anyhow, I am talking about how this body is so complex that when God created the human being, he made these cells so tiny, so tiny and so complex that okay, perfect. You can hear me. So these tiny little cells, they are so specific and special in a way that when they come together, they form the specific organs. And then when the specific organs connect with the rest of the other organs in that system, they perform a function together. So for today, I thought about three things which we can focus on: understanding God's plan based on the body temple health message, and identifying these elements of God's plan in relationship to health message as well. And so therefore, based on what I just shared, you'll find out that each person can create an action plan for their own health, lifestyle change, or preferences based on this particular plan. The God's plan is a simplified plan, which Dr. Dwayne and Nancy McHenry So as you create your own plan, you begin to realize that the health message is an individualized journey. There's no one size fit all. And I like to say this because quite often I come across people who ask me a lot of questions, and to try and answer these questions in one session, it's impossible. So therefore, sorry, I'm pausing because I still have an echo. I'm not sure if I'm echoing from somebody's mic or from my mic, so I'm having to hear myself twice. So because this is a customized journey, each person has to identify where they are and how best they understand their health needs. So take a moment and grab a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, you might want to write these 10 principles, which if you spell the word God's plan, it stands for 1, godly trust, 2, open air, 3, daily exercises, 4 is S, sunshine, P is proper rest, L is lots of water, A is always temperate, nutrition, and attitude of gratitude. So it's a simplified plan, which when each and every individual can at least identify one component at a time and find enough information to apply that in your daily life, you realize that you can experience healing. So healing, therefore, is based on spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, psychological, and these days, financial. So we all suffer threats and problems associated with those components of our lives. So you So begin to think, where am I lacking the balance? As I mentioned last week, it's a balance between those components of who we are. So it's not uncommon for people to tell you that you need to go to this place to get this help and to get this place to get this help, because over the years, the human body has been separated into different segments, and most people are operating in an understanding that they cannot have their needs met unless if they go to 10 or a million different places. But I want you to know this, that God, God created the human being with a plan. And so as you finish taking notes on all these, what I have listed on the screen, I'm going to move on. I still have an echo on my device and I'm still trying to figure out where it's coming from. So that's why I'm pausing so I can let that play out so it doesn't. So here we are. Here is you on a day like this. You're thriving to experience peace. You're thriving to experience joy. You're also thriving to live the best life you can live ever. And you're listening to this message. So I want you to stop for a moment and say, from this list, what can I do today? So you might maybe thinking this on this holy Sabbath day or Sabbath just closed for you, you're thinking godly trust. And you're right. It all begins with a clear understanding on who God is and who God created. God created everything in the universe. So because God created everything in the universe, he created matter. Matter is what we can touch, feel, taste, experience, smell, manipulate, whatever you can think of. So way back in the day, when God created, he created us with a plan. So this plan of God is directly connected to who God is and what God created. But I also want you to know, to keep this at the back of your mind. God also created mankind. And so there's a lot of things which exist today which didn't exist upon creation. Yes, so therefore, understanding matter is the foundation, and this is a subject which is covered mainly in chemistry and physics, and a little bit of it is in biology, and a little bit of it is in archaeology and history. So as you think of the questions you want to ask me, I'm pausing here because I have to clear something. I think this is playing in the background. That's what it is. YouTube was playing in my background. Pardon me for that lack of expertise in terms of technology. But I was sharing with you that the God of heaven who created you and I created us with a plan. And so this plan, in order for us to really understand the health message, we need to go back there, creation. And so I'm not here to preach a sermon, but I want you to think about everything you know about matter. The fact that when living tissue is alive, it can die and decompose is directly connected to the health message. And that's where I think as we continue to share this, you will have some of the questions. I'll be happy to answer them. But for today, it's good to know that godly trust when it comes to the health message is directly connected to what God created and who God created. And at the foundation of health is a big component of a precious gift which God gave human beings, which is choice. So we make choices based on our understanding of what is true, what is right, and what is correct. We also make choices based on our understanding of what works, what doesn't work, and what our experience has been, and what also those around us believe. So I also want you to recognize this. We live in a socialized society where numbers speak. And that's another thing which I would share with you as time goes on. We live in a society where more is better, bigger is best. And so our minds over the years have evolved to begin to appreciate certain things as true when it's not really truth. So I want to pause for a moment. If anyone has questions for me, for those of you who are joining us live, you have questions, I'll take your questions or comments. If you are joining via Zoom, you can raise your hand. If you're joining via YouTube, you can type your questions in the comment section. I'm now taking questions for those who might have questions for me based on what we talked about so far. Okay, silence is golden. Please feel free to type in the chat box some of your questions. So we're talking about matter here. So you must be wondering, so what relevance does this have with health message? And we'll be sharing that a little more. At the core of the human being is the human cell, right? So this cell, of course, we have the study of anatomy, which has told us a little more about what's inside the cell. We also have a study of physiology, which has told us what the cell does. So here on one side, we have the structure of the cell, which eventually defines the structure of the human body. And then on another side, we have the function of those cells in the human body and the human body parts, which then defines what the cell is doing. And so when we look at this from a biblical point of view, we find out that based on the book of Psalms 139, verse 14, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and your works are wonderful, and I know that fully well. And I want to say we all know this fully well, but sometimes we have some knowledge gaps. So what does the cell do? I'm going to just go into a little bit of the science here in a very simplified way, so we can all be on the same page. This little cell you see showing on this slide here is tiny, so tiny that in order to understand what goes on in it or what's inside it, we have to use microscopes. So microscopes have been used over the years to take a closer look at the tiny little cell to understand what goes on in it. And then we also have other studies, which is besides anatomy, we also have pathology. Pathology is the study of knowing what's wrong, what the disease is inside these little cells. So we also have cytology, which is the study of cells, which is a big field of knowing what the cell does. But for the purposes of this message, which I'm sharing with you, I'll make it very simple, what this cell does. This cell reproduces. It can multiply to form other cells. So at the back of your head, you're thinking, oh, is that how cancer develops? Yeah, to a certain extent. And you're also thinking, oh, is that how a baby is developed inside the mother's womb? And the answer is yes. And for those who are into science and modern concepts, you're thinking, oh, is that also is to do with the new technologies coming up of in vitro and all these other? Yes, it has a lot to do with that, because this cell has life. So take note of it. The cell is living, but it can die. And when cells die, disease processes start. This cell needs oxygen, water, nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, this cell. And within this cell, there's movement. Things are moving around, they're not stationary. And within this cell, there's also other electrons, ions, and cations, things like potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium. All these little things I'm mentioning allows this cell to stay alive. It allows this cell to close doors and open doors. It also allows this cell to relate to the cells around it. It also allows the cell to perform the function it was created for or designed for. So I want us to think about what other things could affect this cell function. And I also want us to think about the specific cells which we find in certain body parts, and how when those cells are impacted by diseases, even our choices are impaired. And so I'm not here to teach science, but I'm here to teach the health message, what it is and what it isn't. So this cell, therefore, it is responsible for life at all levels. So if the cells are in the brain, they are responsible for the life of the brain and the functions of the brain. It's a good example I'm just giving you. If these cells are in the lungs, they are responsible for the function of the lungs and allowing the lungs to do their job. And if these cells are in your muscles, they are responsible for the movement of your muscles so you can function. So bear in mind, we said the cell is living, the cell moves, right? And the cell can be diseased. So when more cells are affected by a disease, we see symptoms. That's what it is. So symptoms are a result of tissue or organ, depending on how many cells are suffering at one point. The symptoms can vary from mild, which means a little bit, to severe, which means unbearable. So I want you just to bear this at the back of your mind as we go through this health message, that you are a bundle of living cells. You're not dead until you die. I'm not dead until I die. However, the cell is under attack from within and from without. I'll take your questions and comments at this point. Perfect. Silence is golden. So think, you're hearing the sound of my voice. My voice is sound, which is being transferred into signals, which are hitting my mic right now. And as they hit my mic, I see people who are hearing me, but this sound travels many, many miles. Some of you are joining us from all the way in Africa, hundreds and thousands of miles away. But when this sound hits the outside of your ear, it enters your ear as sound. And automatically within your ear, there are these receptors which receive the sounds, which sends it through a nerve. And this nerve creates electricity, which travels through to the brain, to that part of the brain which interprets what I'm saying. That's how wonderfully and fearfully made we are. So I give this example because most people today's world take it for granted that we can hear, we can feel, we can move. So at any point, a person can go from hearing what I'm saying and not even understanding it, or can hear what I'm saying and understand and fail to respond. And that's possible if the brain cells, for instance, are affected, or the ear cells and so forth. So as we move forward, we want now to look into, so God's plan based on the body temple. What does it mean to you and I? If this is the body which has so much specific functions which are designed from head to toe, as you can see in what I'm sharing, what then does the health message mean? To me, if I was to simplify it today, I would say the health message means anything which touches the body from head to toe. And then it also means anything which influences the body functions from head to toe. I'll take your comments at this point. If anybody has questions for me or comments for me, please feel free to ask. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you for what you're thinking. Yes, the health message is about exactly that. What is the body exposed to every day? What is the body fighting against? What is the body producing inside it? And how is the body responding to what it's exposed to? So therefore, the health message has to do with information which comes inside our body, through our eyes, through our ears, through our nose, through our mouth, and through our skin, as well as through what we eat. So the human body itself is influenced by every single thing it's exposed to. If I start singing and it's a familiar song, chances are you'll join in the song. And I start singing something which you don't like, chances are you're all probably going to turn off this recording or this video and stop watching it, or you're going to react. And that's how wonderfully and fearfully made by God we are. We respond irrespective of whether something is pleasant or unpleasant, something is good or not good. So I want you to just think, before we move on, what are some of the things which influence the body function, which the human body is exposed to every single day? And how is the body responding to that? And with the way the body is responding to that, what does it mean in terms of the health of the body? So it's something to think about. So when I look at the health message, therefore, I am saying, okay, that godly trust peace, it means that I believe that I was created by God, and that the way my body works, only God created it that way. Therefore, I will tend to the next step, which is open air, because open air provides the body the oxygen it needs to thrive. For those of you who are familiar with this current COVID pandemic, we know that it's it really affected a lot of people's breathing. And I don't know what your thoughts were about this particular situation of the COVID, but it affected people's breathing so much that we all worldwide had to put on masks. And because we needed to keep the lungs clear. So open air allows the lungs to function, to be able to provide the body with clean air so the body cells can stay alive, because these body cells need oxygen. So when it comes to open air as a plan, it's grounded in creation. When God created, he placed Adam and Eve in the garden. So
Recording in progress. Sorry, I lost my connection on one of my devices, but I'm back. Continue this conversation about God's plan. So God's plan of open air. So the human body being challenged with open air during the COVID pandemic just meant that we, as human beings, we were exposed to this virus, which threatened our being in terms of health. Therefore, the lack of oxygen was resulting in tissue death. That's what was happening. So the more places which were lacking oxygen, the higher the chance of dying, because oxygen is needed for those cells, which I talked about. In order for life to continue for the cells, the human body has to get oxygen. So it then boils down to this tiny little cell. How many of these cells are going without air or without nutrients or without minerals or without substances which allow this body to stay alive? So the open air is something which is challenged today with a lot of other things, like our environment has its own threats in terms of environmental toxins. And for those of you who are paying attention to what's going on now, it's a big problem. It's being discussed quite a lot about the clean air and all that. So for those who are also familiar of people who take substances or use substances in terms of smoking or any other substances which affects the lung tissue, we know that you end up with problems. And for some people who are also familiar of other breathing diseases like TB and all that, the lungs are threatened. That's why if you work in healthcare, you have to have a TB test done routinely because they want to screen for tuberculosis, which affect the lungs. And that's really an initiative which is implemented in a lot of healthcare facilities. They want to make sure that anyone who works in the health industry does not have exposure to TB. The reason being, TB affects the lungs and it destroys lung tissue and makes it very hard for people to breathe. So that's number 2. So far we've covered godly, trust, and open air. So you can start making plans to say, okay, this coming week, what am I going to do with open air? And you'll find out that when the human brain is exposed to clean air, it functions better. And there's a lot of research supporting this because the brain needs oxygen to function and the brain makes decisions. It's so much needed that we get clean air to breathe air because if you go to a place where there's not enough air to breathe, you start to feel a little suffocating or squashed in. So it's God's plan that we get clean air. The next one is sunshine. Sunshine has its own requirements and also expectations depending on where you are in the world. Most people will tell you that exposure to sunshine causes a lot of cancer. We've heard that and we know that. So a lot of people tend to use sunblock. However, I'm here to tell you that the body needs sunshine. That's why on gloomy days, even in the winter, there are some seasonal mood disorders which are associated with winter because people are not exposed to enough sunshine during that time. And for those of you who will agree with me, if you wake up in the morning and the sun is shining, you feel so much relief. You feel alive, you feel lively. So the sunshine which God created is a natural remedy in many, many ways. The body produces vitamin D when it's exposed to sunshine. Of late, there are many people who are suffering different type of diseases because their bodies is lacking sunshine. It's lacking vitamin D. So sunshine also is required, it's a requirement for plants to grow. So when God created the sun, he had a plan that people would experience healing from the remedies which come from the sun. So the human body, the skin, produces vitamin D and also melatonin, which is a pigment, which if most people with brown skin or dark skins, if they have a higher level of melatonin, they have done studies and they have found out that melatonin influences sleep. So they even make natural melatonin these days, which people have to take in order to sleep better at night. So you might find that sometimes people are not getting good sleep because their body is lacking exposure to sun so that it can develop this melatonin, which is responsible also for somebody to be able to relax better and be at peace and experience balance to a certain extent. So far we've covered those 3. We are on 4. Let's talk about proper rest. Before we move to proper rest, I want to take your questions or comments so I can be able to meet your needs. What are some of the questions you have for me? Perfect. silence is golden. Thank you so much for joining and for watching this video and listening to the sound of my voice. And thank you for bearing with me when I lost connection and I had to reconnect. So here we are, proper rest.
Dr.
Yes.
Stella, I wanted to comment on the issue of sun.
Yes.
Because for us who are living in countries whereby like the winters are long, and you find like from November, December, January, we don't have access to the sun because it's very cold, very, very cold that you can't even go outside. And it really affects the body because most of the time, like people who are here, like those we always feel so tired, like it's fatigue because we don't have we spend more months with no sun.
Yes.
And it's not good for our health. Like you were saying, when the sun comes out, like right now it's spring, and when the sun comes out, you feel so different because of the long winters. And when the sun comes out right now, the body responds to the sun, and it's an awesome feeling. And you feel like something is changing in your body because having stayed 5-6 months without being exposed to the sun is totally not healthy. And like for us who have black the brown skin, it's like I look at my skin in winter, it's become dry. It's dry, and it shrinks a little bit because of no access to the sun. But in the summer, it changes also. So it depends on you know, seasons of the year. But usually in the winter, my skin changes completely. It becomes dry, and it doesn't glow like in the summer. So the sun is very, very important, that when it comes out, like I tend to expose myself to the sun and get more of sunshine, so that when the 7 months of winter comes, I know that I accumulated a little bit of more sun in my body. But it really works for me. Like it's my thinking that when I spend more time outside, I get more, you know, I accumulate more to keep a reserve for the winter. That's my thinking. I don't know whether it's the right thinking or it's just I don't know. Yeah, that's what I wanted to comment on.
Perfect. It's beautiful thinking, and I like what you just said. So you shared that you adjust accordingly because you are aware, and I agree with you. There is what they call seasonal mood disorders, which are very common for people who live in certain climates where they have maybe half the year is winter or 3 months of the year they don't see the sun at all. And some people are not aware of what's going on with them. And it does affect relationships. It also affects how people's outlook is during those times. And it also causes depression in some people, in some areas. So what you've shared is very important. A person needs to be aware of what these changes are doing to their body, definitely. And I agree with you, making those necessary adjustments is very important, that you become proactive. So some people, they might have to have blood work done to check their vitamin D level. And I know that they have vitamin D interventions which are used because vitamin D deficiency causes a lot of other problems in health-related issues, physical health as well as emotional health for some people. So that vitamin D is part of the blood work, which every person should probably get if they see that their health is not the way they think it ought to be for their age and sex and all that. Because, you know, health varies from person to person. What a 16-year-old feels like versus is what a 98-year-old feels like. But it's every single point in life throughout the lifespan. We have to thrive to live the life to the fullest based on what we are capable of doing at that point. And you bring a very valid point also about skin. So skincare is very important for both when people are exposed to the sun for long hours, as well as people who don't have enough sun. It's very important because skin tends to be dry when it's cold, and skin tends also to be dry when it's too hot. So dressing accordingly is very, very important when somebody is outdoors as well. So there is something also which has to do with the sun. The significance of it is that the sun, when it's hot, it kills certain bacteria and certain germs. That's why I believe that during the pandemic, you heard a lot of people say this, that it's the winter, so the virus is going to be raging and so forth. So certain bacteria and certain viruses, they love the cold and the hot, which is why also for people who live in other parts of the world where refrigeration is not accessible, they tend to dry their food in the sun. There's a lot of countries in developing countries where most people don't have electricity or solar, and they live in rural areas, and they use the sun to dry the food, and it actually works very well. If you go to the store here in the US, try and buy sun-dried tomatoes. They're very pricey. So sometimes also when it comes to this health message is to look at, you know, the use of the sunshine in terms of when to grow what type of food and when to also harvest the food, because there is a lot of significance the sun has on livelihood of plants and availability of food as well. Thank you so much for that. So we are moving right along. For those of you who just joined, we are now covering element number 5, which is God's plan. I will share this slide soon, which reviews the 10 points we are discussing today. And at any point, you can feel free to actually just ask me the questions you have for me. This is not a monologue. This is a place where you can comment, ask questions, because we are talking about the health message based on the body temple, what it is and what it's not. So we're moving to the next one. The next element is proper rest. Proper rest is required, and I want to sum it up by saying our bodies need spiritual rest, physical rest, emotional rest, mental rest, and psychological rest. So when we talk about rest for the body, we are talking about all those components. For most people, that spiritual health is a foundation of appreciating rest, spiritual rest. So personally, I gravitate towards taking rest on Sabbath. I take a rest from a lot of things. And why is this rest necessary? You know that the human body is a machine. It's a machine with different parts. And for those of you who drive your cars or bicycles, whichever you ride, you know that at some point that car needs service. So the way to view rest is for restoration, for revival, for renewal. You can use those 3 R's if you want. And why is this significant? Because these body parts which we have in our body are created to need rest. So rest can be experienced during the day, throughout the day. A person needs to take some rest breaks. It also is on a cycle. The 7-day cycle has a lot of significance in experiencing rest. Rest also is in sleep. We need 7 to 8 hours of deep sleep, of good sleep, in order to experience full health. So you could, at this point, ask yourself a question: how is my body getting proper rest? And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's no one size fits all, because some people work nights, some people work days, some people are in relationships with other people and they're not able to rest because they're caregivers. But you need to say, how am I giving my body proper rest? Spiritual, physical, emotional, psychological, and mental rest. And so as time goes by, we'll expound on that as we look at the different body parts and body systems and say, how then do you rest your muscles? How do you rest your brain? So we'll add all these as we discuss different systems. What are some of your questions for me regarding proper rest? Okay, perfect. Ask yourself, how is my body going to get proper rest? Or what is the rest my body needs? That's very important. And so before we move on to the next one, I also want to say this element of proper rest can result in a lot of people not experiencing the peace they need. The peace which will allow them to relate well with others, to also be able to embrace where they are in terms of function and be able to function efficiently. A lot of people do get involved in auto accidents or car accidents because they're not sleeping well and they end up having to end up in an accident. That's a good example, especially those people who drive long distances. So perhaps it might be easier for someone to look at it differently and say, what are the areas of my life which I'm experiencing some challenges right now? And then see if there's a relationship between proper rest and where the challenges are. And so this could be on a personal level, this could be on a work-related level, or a relationship level. Sometimes that helps to reflect like that. Okay, so we've covered 5 things so far. We've covered godly trust, open air, daily exercises, sunshine, and proper rest. We have 5 more to go. So for the next segment, we are going to talk about lots of water. That's what Dr. Duane and Nancy McHenry wrote in their book, The Body Temple. Lots of water. Water is a healer. You've all heard about this, that water heals. Water also allows the body to be revived. Water itself is made up of hydrogen and oxygen as a molecule when you look at it from the chemical point of view. When you look at it from the nutritional point of view, water cleanses the body. Every single body process requires water. And so quite often, most people would come to see me for wellness reasons, or they're experiencing a health challenge. And I ask the question, what do you drink? And I hear a lot of lists of things they drink. And then I let them know, you're not drinking enough water. Water was created by God, and water is needed for every single component of our lives. Without water and air, we would not live. Without water and air and oxygen, the cells die. So when we look at water, let's look at the little cell, the one I talked about earlier. What happens at the little cell level? Remember, we talked about this movement. This movement only occurs with water. I'll give you a good example. Let's say you ate your lunch today, or dinner, or breakfast, and that breakfast had salt in it. Salt, regular salt, table salt, or sea salt, or pink salt, or Himalaya salt, whichever one you use. That salt is existing in your body attached to water. I'm giving you that example for a reason. So if salt exists in my body attached to water, what does it mean? It means that every time I consume salt, there's more water which is going to be retained in my body. And I use this example because it might be meaningful to someone here today, because that alone, salt alone, can result in somebody having high blood pressure for that reason. Because at this little cellular level, there's salt now, more salt than is required. So what salt does, it draws water to it. So you can end up with swelling in this little cell because there's excess fluid and excess salt. I just should use water, salt as an example. So sodium chloride, which is sodium and chloride, makes salt, right? So I use this as an example, but think about other things as well. And why I use this as an example, because most people take it for granted that water could heal a lot of our problems. Yes, it is. It could address a lot of our problems. So water also is used for cleansing. This little cell, as you see it on the slide, it has all these things happening in it, which is called metabolism, which some of you mentioned to me last week. And this little cell is trying to maintain this state of balance, homeostasis, which means that the cell is responsible for what is inside it and what is outside it, in a way. Because this cell has a membrane, which is the surrounding of it. If you look at this, you can see that little shell there. That shell has the ability to open certain channels, allowing certain things to enter and exit. And that being said, therefore, the presence of water impacts that mechanism to a very large extent. So for most people, when they are dehydrated, this cell is suffering. So you might find a good example would be someone might be consuming a high salt meal, a meal which is high in salt. It's just an example here I'm giving you. And if that person consumes salt and they drink water, very little water, that person might have a headache because they're not drinking enough. It's a good example. So some people might experience a headache because they are dehydrated. So when it comes to water, I'm going to say this. We need to drink enough water to keep the body alive. And a lot of people have come up with formulas that you need 8 glasses of water. But as I mentioned earlier, there is no one size fits all when it comes to health. However, there are averages based on research. Research gives us what the average person would need. It is estimated that a human being needs half their body weight in ounces of water. So that means the bigger someone is, the more water they need. The smaller someone is, the less water they might need. So that 8 glasses is an average which is given. It might not really apply to everyone, depending on a lot of factors also. If a person is working outside in the heat in the summer, they are going to lose more water. They are going to sweat more than a person who works indoors sitting in front of their computer. So those are some of the factors which determine how much hydration or water your body needs. So I will leave you there by understanding that water is a needed component of our health. So as we highlight the different body parts in future, you will come to understand and appreciate that water is responsible for a good digestive system to be able to handle the food you eat. We'll begin to understand a little more that water is responsible for heart function. Without good hydration, the heart suffers. Even the brain suffers. The memory is affected without water. And I'll tell you why. So if the human body therefore needs water, and an individual chooses not to drink water, where do you think the water is going to come from to allow these cells to thrive? Obviously, the body is going to draw water from its body organs. So it's very easy for someone who's not drinking enough to end up with a coughing. It's possible. I'm not saying that's the cause, but it's very possible, because if a person is not drinking enough water, the body is going to take water from the lungs. That's just an example I'm giving you on a just superficial level. because water has to come from somewhere for these cells to live. For these cells to eliminate its toxins, there has to be water, because water is what washes the body. So that's about it on water. What are some of the questions you have for me regarding water? Perfect. The silence is golden. So we have covered water. We know that water should be our beverage of choice, but it's not always the beverage of choice.
Doctor.
Yes.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yes.
I have a question or comment. It's inclusive of all. I have
Yes.
3 friends who had the COVID vaccine, and these are people who don't take water at all. One of my friends is was unable. She got the vaccine in October, late October. By the start of the first week of November, she was unable to even stand up. She could not even sit. She could not even talk properly. The speech was affected. And I went seeing her and we were talking, and I just happened to get that she wasn't taking. She took like water, like a glass, like after a week. So, I've had 3 now friends who have reported the problems out of the COVID vaccines. And these are people who don't take water at all. So I visited her like 2 months ago and encouraged her to take water. At least she's able to stand up a bit with crutches. And I spoke to her on Thursday or yesterday, I think yesterday, yeah. She told me that she started taking plenty of water, though she's already affected. So kind of like, again, I can ask now, with the COVID vaccines or any kind of vaccine, any kind of medicine, I think, is it advisable to advise that people are supposed to take enough water or more water than before?
Regarding the COVID vaccine, you're asking me, I would like to respond to this. As I mentioned earlier on, when it comes to the health message, there's no one size fits all. So my recommendation is they can see a wellness expert or have a consultation and have their labs run. And what you're saying, that she started drinking water, she started feeling better, is excellent. I've had my own experiences working with patients who have post-COVID infection itself, that looking at their health and well-being, a lot of their lifestyle is related to some of the challenges they were experiencing after the COVID virus infection itself. So with your friend, I would recommend that they actually can get a consultant who can take a look at what's going on. When you say somebody can't walk, hearing the muscles are not working right, the nerves are not working right. And it's a very good observation you're sharing. Thank you for sharing that. So you can have my number and I'll be happy to talk to you specifically about some of the questions you have for me, if that's okay with you.
Fine. Okay, she's already gone to the doctor, and it has been proved that the nerve system was affected. Yeah.
Yes.
I will.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it's very common for the nervous system to be affected by a lot of things. And definitely, and we will be talking about the nervous system in probably like 24 weeks from now. That's where the nervous system falls in. So everybody can know what the nervous system is and what it does and why it's important to make sure it's cared for. So in the water becomes a common substance which is needed by all our body parts. And so you find out also based on just following up what you're saying, some young people, for instance, would have lack of water in their bodies, in the skin, would have so much issues. So even adults as well, the skin can be dry, the skin can have a lot of bumps on it. It's a sign sometimes that the body is full of toxins. So water is very helpful to flush the systems out. And for anyone who is experiencing health challenge, you might want to see how much water are you drinking. There are some exceptions regarding the amount of water one should drink for someone who's on water restriction because they have a kidney problem or they are on renal dialysis, which is very common for people who have kidney damage. They might have water restrictions, or someone who has one kidney, for instance, and some other people who might have medical conditions which limits how much water they take in because they have a heart condition, because volume of water in the body does affect the heart. So there are instances like that. So I would recommend anyone who's having health problems, who has a water restriction, to contact their medical provider and have that conversation. But definitely water is something we need for optimum health. Thank you. So we are going to move on to the next component, which is A, always temperate. Always temperate. Temperance is known as self-control. Self-control is a big, big part of the health message because as Charles Swindoll put it, 10% of life is what happens to us and 90% is how we respond to it. And so you will find out with the health message is not just self-control with food. Our behavior has a lot to do with it. However, when it comes to the good things, we have to exercise self-control. Remember what we talked about when we talked about proper rest. So you can look at it and say, am I temperate physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, psychologically, as well as nutritional? So there's more to it than one thing, because sometimes when people are convicted of the truth or something they think works or is right, they tend to be so overly obsessed with it that they want to impose it on everyone they come across. And so that's a form of intemperance to a certain extent. So each person needs to ask themselves, how much self-control am I exercising? So we can talk about self-control when we talk about nutrition, for instance, is one area. You can also talk about self-control when it comes to how much you're moving, your exercise. You can't be overly obsessed about exercising because it's trauma to the body. Too much of it is not good. You can't be in the sun all the time because too much exposure to the sun also is detrimental too. You can't be sleeping all day long and not have to work because you need to work. We're created to move. So temperance has a lot of areas which are very broad. It's up to the individual now to say, okay, which area do I lack self-control? Some people can have an issue with just buying, such that they're constantly shopping, and they don't have the money, and yet they are obsessed with buying. That's just an example. Some people might just be so obsessed about eating that they'll just constantly be eating even when they're not hungry. That is a good example of lack of self-control. Some people are always giving other people a hard time constantly, because they feel that they're always right or people should follow what they have to say. That's also another area which needs temperance. So as you move forward and plan to set your own action plan, you need to identify those areas where you need self-control, because even too much of the good thing is also detrimental to the body. And I'm also talking about even digital exposure. Some people can be very obsessed with social media. It's a good example. Or they're constantly listening to the radio or watching TV or constantly on the phone talking. So there's a lot of areas there which each and every person can ask themselves, how am I doing with self-control? Staying up late, things like that. So we'll move on to the next one, unless if somebody has a question for me regarding always temperate, which is number 7. What are some of the questions you have for me? Perfect. Silence is golden. So we are going to move on to nutrition. Nutrition is N, which is 8. What is nutrition? If you ask people, go around and ask people what is nutrition is, most people who gravitate towards the food they like to eat. That's what my observation has been. Nutrition is food choices which offer the body fiber, minerals, vitamins, water. That is what is considered nutrition in most cases. However, sometimes the food we consume is high in salt, fat, and sugar and calories. So I just want to say the best way to look at nutrition is to eat as close as you can to the ground. And if you pick up something with a package and you look at the ingredients and you see anything you cannot pronounce yet or read, possibly you probably need to eliminate that out of your food choices. That's as simple as I'm going to put it with nutrition. However, as we move forward with these sessions, we are going to look at what is proper nutrition at any given age. So I like to use a very known concept, which is a US-based concept, American-based concept, which talks about, it's called My Plate. You can Google this, myplate.gov. The My Plate concept, when it comes to meals, is based on a plate which is 9 inches. You look at a 9-inch plate, half of it should be vegetables, raw or cooked, a quarter of it should be starch, and a quarter protein. Anything outside that guide is pretty much excess. And when it comes to nutrition, most people who come and see us in our wellness program tend to ask me this question, Dr. Stella, what should I eat and how much should I eat? And it's a very complex question to answer. But I can tell you this, for most people, the stomach is the size of the fist. However, over time, as we eat more, our stomach stretches. So we tend to need more to eat. So we will be talking about nutrition more when we talk about the digestive system, which is the GI, which will cover the digestive system in probably week 30 from now. If we go topic by topic, if we double up, it might be sooner. It's important that each and every person understands how their digestive system is created and how it works. Very, very important. Because for those of you who read Ellen G. White's books, she has highlighted the importance of understanding the physiology of the body. And she's also said this should be the first lesson to be taught to children of how the body works. She's also said that most people in their stomach, there's war in the stomach. And for most adults, they suffer from acid reflux. It might not be familiar for those of you who are younger, but most adults do. And so when we talk about the digestive system, please bring all your questions to do with digestion and indigestion, which is a good part of nutrition. Nutrition is a subject which a lot of people are making a lot of money from these days by selling all kinds of diets. In our program, we've seen a lot of clients who come to us who've been on every single diet in the world, and 30 years later, they still have the problem. I'm not speaking for or against diets, but I'm saying God has a plan. So when it comes to nutrition, there is God's plan on how we should eat. And I'm not speaking for or against meat or anything. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying the body has needs. The body needs fiber, nutrients, vitamin, water, and minerals, and a certain amount of glucose. So what are your thoughts and questions on nutrition? Okay, feel free to type in the chat box or raise your hand or open your mic whenever you have a question for me. I'll be happy to pose. We are moving right along. So we've talked about one, godly trust, which is the foundation, which brings us to an understanding that I did not create myself. I was created by God, who has a plan. We've talked about open air, the need for proper oxygen and clean air in order for the cells to function. We've talked about sunshine, the importance of the sun and the significance in our lives. Proper rest, lots of water, always temperate in nutrition. So we have two more to cover. Attitude of gratitude. When I read this in the book, The Body Temple by Dr. Dwayne and Nancy McHenry, I asked myself, I said, how did this come into this book? And then I realized that it's a concept which literally affects the nervous system in many, many ways. So when you look at attitude is how we view the world or how we respond to the world. Attitude is also what we are known to value. So there's a lot of concepts which impact our attitude. Our attitude is based on our experiences. Our attitude is based on our preferences, as well as our culture, or where we come from. But we want to make it simple here. What does gratitude have to do with health? And so my understanding of gratitude is giving thanks and always being thankful. And I can tell you this, if you were to Google on your computer today, the word gratitude, attitude of gratitude, you will see a lot of writings on this. Some of them talk about a grateful person is a humble person. Some of them talk about how if you're ungrateful, you actually have pride in yourself. Some of them talk about how gratitude makes you very content. There's a lot of writing on this. But I want to bring this to your attention from a different perspective. I want you to think about what you know or you've heard about the fright mechanism. Most of you are familiar with this, some are not, and I'll explain it. So, for instance, we are in this room, we are in this setting, you are listening to my voice. For all of a sudden, if there's a loud sound in your environment, chances are you're going to get up and you're going to run towards where the sound is, or you're going to get up and run away from it, or you're going to be shaken and go under your table, depending on where you are and how you feel. So there's some relevance to this. God created our bodies to thrive. So we are hardwired to influence our environment. And it's very biblical because God said, be fruitful and multiply and inhabit the earth. So within the human body, there are mechanisms which allow the human body to fight and survive. And for some reason, these tend to be dominant these days than it was at some point, because I'm 52, and at 52, I've seen the change from people always wanting to fight, to win, to get it, to be the one, and so forth. So this particular example I gave you is a situation where when you hear the loud sound, it automatically triggers processes in your body, which allows you to respond right away with force, with fire, with excitement, with fear, with everything. And most of the time, when we are experiencing such a situation, it's almost impossible to be grateful. So I'm trying to make it simple and non-scientific here. So you're thinking, okay, so why is she going that far? That was my my foundation for appreciating the attitude of gratitude. I then said, okay, so it is the opposite of when I am frightened, when I'm running, and when I am fighting. Yes. So the first mechanism which is responsible for that response, which I explained to you, is called the sympathetic nervous system. It's not sympathy, but it starts with this SY, like sympathetic nervous system. So I will be talking a little more about this system in the nervous system when we cover the nervous system, and then you begin to connect the dots and say, is that why when I feel like this, when I am under a lot of stress, I can't even pray, or I don't even want to sing? Yes, I've heard people say that. Dr. Stella, pray for me because I'm in so much stress, I can't even pray. And so in my mind, I'm like, so the switch has turned off or has turned on. So the human body has two switches. That switch, which prepares me to fight, to be aggressive, to be running, to be frightened, to be hiding, which is the sympathetic nervous system. The other one is not quite the opposite, but it produces the opposite effect to a certain extent. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. So if I was to give you an example of that, picture yourself, you're sitting on the toilet and you're reading a newspaper, or you're reading your favorite book and you're relaxed. It is in that instance when that system is dominant that a person's bowels move, their blood pressure is low, their pulse is low, and the different chemicals, which I talked about last week, you have to watch last video, are released to maintain balance. So when I looked at attitude of gratitude, I said, okay, so this is the key which opens the door for me to be calm, to be humble, to be accepting, to be thankful, to be appreciative of life. So an attitude of gratitude allows us to be thankful, to be humble, to be appreciative of God's plan on an ongoing basis. So I just thought I would use those two examples so that you can find the examples in your life where you can say, yes, at this point, I'm forgetting to be grateful. And it's so biblical that for those of us who are believers, when we are faced with a situation where we have to make a choice, we ask ourselves, is this going to make a difference in my life? Is this going to make a difference in another person's life? And if it's not, you let it go. And so you might be wondering, how is this all connected to the health message? Because it is often said, you're better off eating a Twinkie. Twinkie is like a snack with friends than eating broccoli alone. Very significant. So we find sometimes people are so hung up with eating a certain way and they are never grateful. And people do suffer certain diseases even though they're eating healthy, because they're forgetting that this human body was created by God, who gave it ability to maintain balance. So as an action plan, you might have to ask yourself every morning, what am I grateful for? Every evening, how is my gratitude meter going? Because I find this attitude of gratitude is so much lacking in society now that when you come across a young person, they want to grow up so they can go to school. When you come across a grown-up who's grown up and gone to school, they want to go and to own their first house. If you come across someone who owns their first house, they want a bigger house. And if they have a car, they want 2 cars. And if they have 2 cars, they want to rebuild their house or redecorate their house. And I say this with passion because I've had opportunities to interact with people who, in my eyes, I think they have everything. But in their eyes, they are lacking. I come across friends and family every day who are saying, believe it or not, I'm going back to school again. And, and so 5 years ago, I told you I wasn't going to school. And I realized that this attitude of gratitude, when we make it a theme of our day, we'll be satisfied with just eating pumpkin and collard greens for dinner and never wish we had anything else beyond that. We'll be so satisfied that we could have papaya and pineapple and a banana for breakfast and still live. So I say this because I'm not here to promote any form of eating or not, but I'm saying when we pause for a moment and we have an attitude of gratitude, we'll be so grateful for what is in front of us, such that our minds will not even think of lack. So the thought of lack is dominant sometimes when we forget to be grateful. So cherishing an attitude of gratitude is one of those blessings and the gifts which God has given us in this health message. So you might want to start to write some of the things you've been thankful for. A lot of people who are life coaches and business coaches and health coaches, they use this concept quite a lot. I'm sure you've heard and read books on how gratitude, an attitude of gratitude, will change your world. So what comes to mind for me as I speak to you, as I share this with you, is that we were born with nothing and we will live this world with nothing. So therefore, we are grateful that we even have life today the way we see it. We're grateful that we even faced this opportunity to understand that which we can understand. So what really comes to mind to me is that as we pray, as we seek God every day, as we seek to live the healthy lives we can, let us be thankful for that which we know and that which we can do. Perhaps this will help to shift our body system from where the body is constantly fighting and frightened and running to where the body is at peace, knowing that where I am now, I'm doing my best and I'm grateful. So I'll take your questions and your comments on the attitude of gratitude. Silence is golden. The last thing we are going to talk about is benevolence. Benevolence. If you were to look up the definition of benevolence, you'll find out that it is defined as an act of kindness, an inclination to be kind, a quality which most people would possess if they want to help someone, to volunteer, to give service to someone without expecting anything in return. Most people who have benevolence, they are at peace. The whole world knows very well about Mother Teresa, who is well known for her great work in helping the poor. She lived a great life. There are some examples which some of you might know of people who wrote songs when they were in distress, people who wrote a lot of poems and a lot of gifts, books which they gave away as gifts. So benevolence, this quality of benevolence is a very, very important attribute of health, because it is the benevolence which gives us that ability to have a joyful life, peaceful life, to be able to give and forgive. It's also a foundation for experiencing healing. And I say this kindly because over the years, I've had privileges of working with different clients with different problems. So I'll briefly share one of my clients who came to me. It's not just one, I could share a lot, but I'll share this one. That's about 10 years ago. One lady came to me and she was experiencing a lot of back pain. And so when people have back pain, they have all kind of diagnostic tests done. And these tests can include x-rays, and x-rays are looking to see if there's anything broken. They can also include MRI, which is magnetic resonance imaging, which is trying to see if there is any mass or any rupture or any tissue which has been displaced, which is pressing on something like a nerve, giving pain. This particular patient had it all done. X-rays were clear. MRIs were normal. Blood work was perfect. She still had pain. So when people come to see me with pain, I do an assessment to see what triggers the pain. I'm looking for a pattern to see what makes the pain better and what makes the pain worse. It's called differential diagnosis, to really try and pinpoint where the issue is. In this particular instance, I did everything I could. I could not trigger pain. I then said to my client, then, I have checked and you have a clean report from every test which has been done. And the lady said, but I'm hurting. I said, I know you're hurting. But after I have done a full review and examined you, I realized that there's something else. This is not physical pain. And I share this because this young lady ended up telling me her story where she had experienced trauma years ago. And I said, how many years is this? She said, it's been 20 years. And all I did was listen to the story. She was very tearful. She was emotional about it. I listened to the story. And when I was done listening to the story, I didn't really have much time to do anything else. So I said to her, I am going to put a hot pack on your body, on your back, heating pad. And I'm going to give you 3 stretches to do for your back, because I did not do what I intended to do because I could not isolate your pain. So I did that. And I can tell you this, 3 days later, the same person came back to me with a smile on her face. She said, you're a miracle worker. You healed me. I said, no, God allowed me to come in contact with you so you can express yourself, because your pain was not physical pain. That back got better, that pain was gone. And so I am not saying this, that every back pain will go, but I am telling you that emotional trauma manifests itself in body symptoms. It's all over. You can read it. And I also want you to know something which is called a placebo effect and a nocebo effect. So when I look at benevolence, I then say, okay, so there's a direct correlation between relief from suffering and the placebo effect. So the placebo effect is something which scientists have come up with. They have taken, for instance, a group of people who have pain, for example, and put them blindly in 2 groups. And in these 2 groups, I'm just using an example. One group, they treated them with a pill for pain. And the other group, they just gave them a sugar pill. Placebo effect has taught scientists that people get better when they think they're getting a treatment. So even in the group of the people who got a sugar pill, there's a certain amount of people who got better by just thinking that they get medication. So the placebo effect is very common and it exists. And there is an element of that. When you believe something is going to help you, it helps you. And there's also the nocebo effect, which is almost the opposite of that. If I feel something is going to hurt me, it will definitely hurt me. If I feel something is not good for me, it will definitely end up being good. So the nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect. It describes a situation where negative outcomes, which is negative results, in other words, are produced by worrying about that situation. So when I looked at benevolence, I said, okay, is it then perhaps possible that people who exercise benevolence, they center their lives towards purpose rather than their pain. And to a certain extent, yes, because history taught us this. So by then looking at benevolence as a word which encompasses a lot of things, which include kindness, which also include the willingness to serve, which is very biblical because we are servants first. Jesus was a servant, he led by example. I then realized that benevolence, therefore, is a part of the health message. Allow us as individuals, perhaps, to look at our lives every week and say, where are my biggest fears? And where are my pain points? And where is my service centered? And it is in so doing that we experience poor health. So before I close, I want to just read to you chapter 1 of the book, The Body Temple, which is titled, A Body Thou Hast Prepared Me. Genesis 1 verses 26 and 27 reads, And God said, Let us make men in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created men in his own image, and in the image of God created him. Male and female created he them. God not only created mankind, but he gave us an honest manual. The Holy Bible, he said, Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. Proverbs 3, verses 5 to 6. God knows how the body functions. He is the creator. When we live according to God's plan, our bodies function quite nicely. In the first 3 chapters of the Bible, one will find the 10 health principles of the law. And these 10 principles are godly trust, open air, daily exercise, sunshine, proper rest, lots of water, always temperate, nutrition, attitude of gratitude, and benevolence. When sickness comes, the very best place we can turn to is the great physician in the manual that he provided. We are told in God's manual that obedience to these health laws brings health. And he said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do what is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and will keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which are brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. Exodus 15, verse 26. Disobedience results in sickness and sin. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken me unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Deuteronomy 28, verse 15. The Lord shall make the pestilences cleave unto thee, until he has consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. Deuteronomy 28, verse 21. The Lord shall smite thee with consumption, and with a fever, and with inflammation, and with extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with the mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. Deuteronomy 28, verse 22. God also gave us the lesser light in Ellen G. White's Counsels on Health, page 38. So closely is health related to our happiness that we cannot have the latter without the former. A practical knowledge of the science of human life is necessary in order to glorify God in our bodies. It is therefore of highest importance that among the studies selected for childhood, physiology should occupy the first place. How few know anything about the structure of the human body, that their own bodies, how they work. And in nature's laws, many are drifting about without knowledge, like a ship at sea without a compass or anchor. And what is more, that we are not interested to learn how to keep their bodies, that they are not interested to learn how to keep their bodies in health condition and prevent diseases. Thousands of books have been written on the subject of human anatomy and physiology. The great majority of these books have attempted to break down the human body into a long list of integral parts. The body parts have been given names. Many of these names are nearly impossible to pronounce and certainly impossible to remember. So therefore, in the body temple, we shall approach the study of anatomy and physiology from an entirely different perspective, and perhaps you have even contemplated. So we know that the study of anatomy is the branch of science that deals with the structure of the body or organisms. The structure of human anatomy is, of course, absolutely fundamental and an essential to an understanding of human organisms. We cannot better understand who we are until we understand what we are. And the study of physiology is the science of function of the living organism and its components, and chemical and physical processes involved in it. In other words, the physiology is the study of the mental, the physical, the spiritual functions. So I am going to end here today by saying that take a moment and reflect. Perhaps you need to listen to the other recording on matter, elements, and atoms, protons, ions, and cations, which is really embedded in chemistry. Know about energy, because we are energy. We are just energy. Everything in our body operates based on energy. And that energy is fueled by food. And that energy is sustained and maintained when our bodies have balance. So for next week, we will be looking at the actual cell, the different parts of the cell, as well as body tissue. It is not my intent that I turn anyone here into a science major, but I hope and trust that each and every one of us will gain a better understanding on how our body works and what diseases mean and how we can connect this with God's plan. Thank you so much for joining, for watching, for listening. I'll take your comments, your questions before we close. Thank you. Okay, any questions, comments for those who are live? Okay, I want to say thank you. Give yourself a hand and continue to plan to watch more videos or spend time with us as we do these messages week after week to bring the message home and make life a joy for most people who are experiencing challenges. Thank you so much. Unless if you have something to share, we are going to end this presentation. Any more comments from the audience?
Just want to say thank you, Dr. Stella.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you next week. Please share with your friends and your loved ones and let them gain an understanding on how the body functions and what to ask their doctor as well when they go to the doctor, so the doctor can best help them. Because doctors are very helpful people. They help a lot of people find a breakthrough, but sometimes people are not able to communicate very well to their doctor what's going on in their bodies. And so the information is kind of lost through translation. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else has comments, questions? Okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful week and God bless. We'll see you here next week. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.